All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 32 of Destination, the show. My name is JD Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Wolves playing a big one tonight,
It's a
so
big game. We need to do like a Timberwolves episode, I feel like.
we can
Amp of
do
the
that.
51 last night.
Yeah. So it's just a fun time to be a sports fan with the beginning of the baseball season,
hmm
playoff basketball, and it's really the middle of March or the middle of April start kicks off draft season, which we love.
It sure
So
does. We are past the halfway point in college baseball now,
which
if you
seems
can believe
crazy.
it. Is Cat coming back tonight for this Denver game? What do we think?
Nope.
He's close,
Nope.
apparently.
He's I think it's going to be Friday. He's going to get 2 games at home,
Okay,
and then playoffs in a week.
crazy.
It's gonna be
You're gonna
fun.
be there?
Depending on my schedule and coaching baseball, I believe that I will be at home game one because it's either going to be Saturday, Sunday. Then game two will be probably Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and all likelihood is that they'll be playing at 9 o'clock at night, which is not super conducive to being a normal human being and
Yeah, especially an old
working.
man like you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go to the first one, and then we'll see on the second one, and then
Right on.
everything after that. But yeah, I got my tickets. We're all squared away.
Good deal, man. I'm excited for you. Let's knock out some housekeeping before we jump in because Jeremy, we have so much to talk about. It is kind of unbelievable. You guys can find us on YouTube at Destination the Show. So please drop us a sub. We put all of our episodes up there for anyone who unfathomably would prefer to look at us than listen to us. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. You will notice a significant uptick in draft content at the Twitter because, as Jeremy said, we're getting into draft season. And wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate the support. You can do that by downloading episodes, liking, subscribing, leaving us positive reviews, or asking us questions. We love questions. And if you're really eager to go above and beyond, you can also email the show. It's destinationtheshow@gmail.com if you want to share some thoughts or you want to drop us a question. Jeremy, all affiliates are up and running. So I feel like we're both in like the same stage of life, which is too busy with kids doing sports and other shenanigans and not enough time to watch as much baseball as we might like. But have you had a chance to watch any minor league games yet? Anyone who's caught your eye from the first short sample size 1 week or so of the season?
So I did, and man, this was a few days ago. Obviously, the Twins played their first night game a couple nights ago, so nights have been
Finally.
relatively open.
hmm
Um, and so whatever night Marco Raya was pitching, I turned that game on, flipped between that one and Cedar Rapids, I believe it was, and I thought Raya looked all right. Um, the names that are sticking out though, at least Twins wise, are the names that Walker Jenkins going down.
Such
That
a
was a bummer.
bummer.
But there's some dudes on that team. I don't the Brandon Winokur home run tonight
Yep.
was an impressive little flick of the wrist, looked like a pop up, and
Ridiculous
then
power.
just lands, over in Cape Coral. And then the Churio kid is something else.
Yep.
We've said that before. Churio said that before about a Churio, but this one kind of came with less fanfare. Came in a trade,
Yeah.
back end of the top 30, and if he keeps that up, obviously it's low A, right? So there's obviously work to do,
hmm
but any early season developments like that are promising, and you're going to have that too with pitchers. It's just going to take longer, right? Because they're not getting a ton of appearances. So those are kind of the some names that have popped up for me anyway. Um, you, on the other hand, I'm guessing has a little broader scope.
So I've been digging around, and I have to confess, I haven't dug through as much of the data as I have wanted to yet. I'm really one of the things I'm most interested to see are the starting pitching group that is back in Cedar Rapids. So Andrew, those guys have clearly, to me, differentiated themselves from the rest of that rotation through one start as looking really, really good. So Andrew Morris had a really good start. Zebby Matthews looked excellent this evening. And so I'm really curious to see what their stuff is like when we get the data through on that and how it kind of matches up with what they were working on last year and that conversation we had with Jonas Lovin, the Cedar Rapids pitching coach, who is back with their group again. It's funny that you mentioned Churio. I did want to bring him up. I know Tom Froming and others have talked about his start to the season, and I think he's been a little bit of a industry trendy Twins lower level name to pop potentially this year. So I pulled these numbers a couple days ago, so we're probably a little out of date, but 500, 571, 667 line, walking 14% of the time, 91.4 mile per hour average exit velocity, not chasing a ton. The one thing that's interesting, I think, and it's just small sample size nonsense, but it's a lot of ground balls. But he's really interesting because the offensive profile is so well-rounded, and there's not really much to pick at or many holes yet. I'm sure something will come up, but I'm curious about him. And then one of your favorites, Jeremy, for the Brewers, Cooper Pratt, big opening weekend, walking north of 25% of the time, 364, 533, 636 in the opening weekend. And I know he was a guy that we were eager to see in action early days this season. So excited for him. But did you get a chance? I don't suppose you've kept up with Emmanuel Rodriguez's opening salvo at Wichita by any chance, have you?
Of course I've kept up, Let's rewind this about 2 weeks where I said he's going to be a difference maker for the Twins.
Yeah.
And at this point, if dudes don't start to hit, why wouldn't he get a chance? And it's like, maybe it's early, maybe it's too quick. And yeah, it probably is. But when you don't have any more options on the 40 man, this is what happens. And all you need is an opportunity. It would be a mistake to think that he is going to come up and be the savior. But I also thought that about Royce Lewis. So anyway, now do your thing.
There's just two numbers I'm really interested in for Erod, right? Early days. And this is like 6 games, so it's really nothing. If you can believe it, he's actually swinging less. He's swinging less at AA than he did at Cedar Rapids. The swing rate, the swing percentage so far is like 33%. It's almost never. But we have also talked about contact percentage a lot and that kind of swing and miss aspect to his game. Last year, his contact percentage was 68%, somewhere in that 66 to 68 range. Through his opening 5 games or so, he's up to 75%. And if he were to maintain that through a whole season, he will be a top 15, 20 prospect by the end of 2024, in my opinion. So exciting start. But we also got to talk about the bad news. Did you see Jefferson Cairo today out for the season after surgery to repair his labrum? What's your take on that, man?
So, I mean, it's always a bummer when guys go down, and we've seen a lot of that. Personally, from a Brewer standpoint, this is the best time to have it happen, right? You lose the development year, but you have Contreras. You don't have to start his service clock and put him on the major league injured list. He was added to the 40, right? So this would be an option year. I'd have to look to see. He'd likely qualify for a 4th year because he's not active. He's not going to be active this year, which then sets back that clock because there's different clocks and it's confusing. But I don't know that it's a huge hindrance to what the Brewers are trying to do. Obviously, it's a bump in the road for him, but guys are going to get hurt, and if this is when he gets hurt, it's really the best case scenario from the Brewers' perspective because they weren't counting on him to be the major league catcher. It's kind of different with Royce Lewis. right? Royce Lewis was going to be the everyday guy. He was going to be a cog in the middle of the order, and now he's not.
Yep.
And so it's a bummer. But the timing, you missed the year. It's what I thought it's a 9-month recovery, which puts him in line to start ramping up with the turn of the calendar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he becomes a full go at spring training and plenty of time to ramp back up. And so it is a bummer. You hate to see the top prospects go down, but I think that he'll be okay, and I think the Brewers will be okay too.
Yeah, for sure.
Before you move on away from this, though, the Orioles AAA team is freaky.
So I have a take on this that is going to be very unpopular. So, first of all, congrats to Jackson Holliday, promoted to the Orioles in time to be eligible for a PPI pick, by the way, a conversation we had a week or so ago on this very podcast. Here's my old man yelling at clouds take about the Orioles AAA roster. I don't want my AAA team to be that dominant. I want to have traded some of those guys for better pitching that is going to sustain a major league winner for longer. They have 1 year of Corbin Burns. Kyle Bradish is hurt. Grayson Rodriguez obviously looks incredible in spurts. They have too many guys that have no path to playing time in the near future on that. And I know that's like, I see your like wry smile because we talk about that with the Twins and then like ho-hum, everybody's injured. But legit on that Orioles team, Jackson Holliday was promoted to the majors, I think, with a 949 OPS, which was the 5th best on that team. Where are all of those guys going to play? And is there a point at which they have too much kind of value embedded in that AAA team? You're shaking your head vigorously, so give me your counterpoint.
Absolutely not, right? Because value is value, and you just asked if there's too much value, and the answer is no. If they want to go get somebody, they have the ammunition to do it, and the value of a AAA guy. Kirsten has he had like 25 runs batted in the first week. I'm like, that's a typo. Like,
it's wild.
They can go get whoever they want, and guys getting it done at AAA are more valuable than guys getting it done at low A, or guys that should be getting it done at AAA that aren't getting it done at AAA. And if someone gets hurt, they got a dude to just fill in. If they call, and here's the thing for me. So often you see such and such team is into such and such player, but that team wants help off the big league roster, and team is hesitant to deal big league help. Yep. And so they say, hey, we want this guy. And that team says, well, we like your prospects, but we really like this guy from the big league team. And the Orioles say, okay, we'll just restart the clock with the player that might be better, right? And just move on. And so I don't think there's any issue unless you get complacent at AAA. But with so many dudes, I feel like that's just it's competition, and it's competition, and it's competition. And Jackson Holliday getting called up, super cool, right? But there's so many guys that are close. Now, from a fantasy baseball perspective, I'm in a league where I've told you I took Jackson Holliday's little brother last year. And then my son joined the league. So we're doing this draft. We're looking for a name. There's another Holliday who's younger. His name's Reed. I think he's a middle schooler. I'm like, hey, he's probably gonna be the first pick in the draft like 8 years from now. And now you're set from a fantasy perspective. So.
Wild. Ethan, younger brother, is top 3-5 name in the 2025 draft. So
the Twins today just really kind of screwed this up because there's going to be a tank for Ethan Holliday, something that has to rhyme, right? Play badly for Adley.
There you go.
What do we have rhyme with Ethan? I don't know.
We'll have someone. We need someone smarter than us to figure that out.
Come up with it, yeah, because he's going to be, in my opinion, and it's not worth much right now because what do I know about the 2025 class? Not a whole lot. Ethan Holiday is the favorite to go first, and someone's going to have to play really, really well to unseat him because your dad was a major league player. Your brother exceeded all expectations. Why wouldn't you? Especially when people are like, he's better than his older brother was at the same age.
That's
So
wild.
that's exciting. But before we get too far into 2025, maybe we should talk about 2024.
Yeah, let's talk about 2024. So last week, just before we recorded, draft bonus pools and international signing window pools were released. Draft pools for this year and national signing for 2025 period. We said we're going to do a deep dive on this. We're going to go through all of the ins and outs of this because if you're newer to the draft or you want to get into the draft more, this stuff is really confusing. It's not very intuitive.
That changes all the time.
And it changes all the time. So we're going to go through and walk through how the money of the draft works right now. So I'm going to turn it over to you for that stuff. But before that, we're going to do just a quick timeline to kind of orient us to what is going to happen between now and July. So MLB just announced the draft bonus pools and the pick values. You're going to explain a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. The next major event after that is really June. In June, we'll have the MLB Draft Combine. Exact dates of that TBA. That's I think a 5-day process now where players are invited to participate. They go down to, it'll be hosted in a major league stadium. They go down there, they get to meet with teams, they participate in workouts. It's an opportunity for folks to improve their draft stock, right? Because it's all StatCast tracked. And last year, you can see Brandon Winokur put on an absolute show in batting practice. So it's an opportunity for folks to separate themselves. The draft itself is a 3-day event this year being held in Dallas-Fort Worth. Opening day is July 14th. And then day 2, which is rounds 3 through 10, is the 15th. And 16 is rounds 11 through 20. So it's split up into 3 chunks. And basically, Major League Baseball is working really hard to make that more of an appealing, fun, exciting event, right? So we see that through increased television exposure. We see that through the draft lottery. I don't think they're very good at doing that yet. But that's also one of our one of the things we'd like to do is get it more popular and get more folks excited about it. So why don't you kind of walk us through what day 1 of the draft looks like? Because I think that's the thing that's going to draw the most eyes and have the most people excited. But it's also kind of complicated because it's not just basic rounds.
Right. So the NFL draft to me is the most popular draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do 1 round, 32 picks, and then we're done. We know how those teams are ordered. Right, there's no lottery in the NFL. Worst pick, playoff teams. Then they by round to 32 Super Bowl champ. Baseball has really kind of gone through a series of changes, which back in the Joe Mauer days, the leagues actually alternated the first overall picks.
That's so wild.
The Twins get Joe Mauer because it was the American League teams' turn to pick first.
That's so wild.
And then they went away from that just by previous year record. Now they do the draft lottery. So that's really kind of made it more complex. Typically 31st round picks, but not always, right? If you're forfeiting picks or if you're dropping down. So some of that stuff we can get a little more into the weeds on. But the top 6 picks by lottery, and then we move on from there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's day 1, 30-ish picks, and then the introduction of the PPI picks. So after 30 picks this year, the Diamondbacks will pick 31 because Corbin Carroll was promoted early and won Rookie of the Year. The Orioles will pick 32 as an incentive for Gunnar Henderson coming up early and getting Rookie of the Year. So there's other ways to earn those picks, but that adds these 2 picks. Then you have these compensation picks that are tied to free agents, which it used to be far simpler where guys just got the pick here. Your team's got the pick if your guy left. Now it's tied to contracts. So the Twins will be able to draft Sonny Gray or a replacement for Sonny Gray or something tied to Sonny Gray leaving, the same way that they were able to draft Jose Barrios as compensation for Michael Kadire leaving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not really the first round anymore, but not yet the second round. And these they call them PPI picks and then a comp pick, but the normal fan would just refer to these as the comp round picks.
Mm-hmm.
After those 3 picks, we actually get into the comp round, which comp round A after the first round, comp round B after the second round. Those teams get these picks based on being revenue receiving teams. Essentially, the Yankees are going to go buy their dudes. The Dodgers are going to go buy their dudes. So these handful of teams, they're going to get extra picks. And along with that, the extra slot money to get their dudes. So 6 picks in comp round A, those picks can be traded. No other picks can be traded. So the Brewers will pick in comp round A because they got a pick from the Orioles for Corbin Burns, and they'll pick in comp round B. In between those 2 comp rounds are 30-ish more picks. However, the Angels, Astros, Cardinals, and Giants don't have those picks this year on account of signing some free agents that were tied to a draft pick. So that round is a little bit shorter. Then you have comp round B, which this year is 8 teams. The White Sox got a pick from the Mariners in a trade. And then to end day 1 this year is going to be a Angels pick, which they received for getting Shohei Ohtani. Now you say, why would the Twins get a pick higher than the Angels? That doesn't make sense. But that has to do with who's receiving, who's paying luxury tax, who's receiving revenue, who's not. And the Angels spend way more money than the Twins. So they get slapped on the wrist because they lost the greatest baseball player of all time. And as a result, they get the 74th pick. So there'll be 74 picks this year. There will be a number that's not 74 next year, right? So that's just day 1. First round, I believe, is like 5 minutes, but it's made for TV time. And so they're going to take their time in between picks, even though the picks are in, to talk about the guys. Why? Because we got to drum up some interest. As you get out of that, it becomes much quicker, right? Even on the end of day 1, it's like these picks are happening so fast where guys don't get their proper time, right? They might be getting drafted during a Taco Bell commercial, like the Joker. So that's day 1, right? Compensation picks. But once the draft order's set, guys are signed, like that's what it's going to be. And so those 74 picks are set. I believe that teams can still trade those comp round picks. I've read that they're only allowed to be traded during the year, which I've seen picks traded not during the year. I've also read that they're only allowed to be traded once, which I don't believe I've seen any pick be traded more than once. So again, these are like rules, but nobody really knows the rules. So whatever happens, happens. So that's day 1. Anything that I missed?
No, I don't think so. I think the only thing I would point out for clarity is that those teams that receive comp A or comp B picks, they alternate year over year, right? So
Correct.
The Twins, for example, received a comp A in 2023. They took Charlie Soto. They receive a comp B this year. They'll go back to comp A in 2025. So, okay. So we talked a little bit last week about bonus pool allocations and pick values. What on earth does that mean, right? What is a bonus pool, and how do slot values work in the first half of the draft?
So if you think about the other drafts that you follow, NFL, NBA, all those picks are like hard slotted. So if you go first overall in the NBA draft, you're getting X amount of dollars in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. The options are all determined. Like everything is hard capped. And so there's a value to it. And then teams in the NBA anyway can go up to like 20% more than that, which everybody does. That becomes their salary. In baseball, it's not that way. So each pick has a value tied to it, but the combination of all of your pick values are your pool. And so
Okay.
nobody ever talks about the NBA, the teams having a pool, because you just pay each pick what they're worth. But because we don't necessarily trade draft picks in the Major League Draft, what we do is we just give you your money to spend how you want. So if you want to trade down, instead of paying $3 million for the pick, you're going to pay someone less, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you can move up later. And that's maybe oversimplifying it or just overcomplicating it for people, because you're stuck in there. You have that money to spend how you want.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, teams then can take overages and pay overages of their draft pool. So like the Twins, they've never paid it, right? If their pool was $9 million, they're going to spend up to $9 million, but no more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Most teams, not most, I think all but 3 at this point have paid taxes. You can pay up to 5% more, right? So you spend 1.4 or 105% of your pool, and you're good. You pay a tax, or you pay the extra, you pay a tax, but you don't get penalized.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that pays over that, you get an extra tax. And then if you get over, is it 10%, you start to lose draft picks,
Yeah.
right? And so clerical issues can sometimes be a thing. There's some teams, and you've probably remember this better than I do. There's like a $2,500 something that
Oh,
some teams like don't claim on their
it's like an
bonus.
insurance thing or something.
So but it's dumb, right? And so no team has ever here the important part. Teams will go into the overages.
Mm-hmm.
No team has ever forfeited a draft pick.
Yep.
So if you're like, well, what does this mean? It means teams will go into their to the overage. Teams will not go so far in to lose a pick.
Yep.
Players and agents know this, right? And so the release of bonuses sometimes are slow and then sometimes come out all at once, because if you're the number 1 pick, Walker Jenkins, and your agent, Scott Boras, knows exactly what's left in the pool,
Mm-hmm.
they say, we want this plus I know you have 5% extra.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's what happened last year.
Yep.
The Twins said, we're not going to pay the bonus. He said, we're not signing for less than this. And that's why it went to the end, because at the end, someone had to blink. And like he's done so many times this offseason, it was Scott Boras. And I love to say that.
Yeah, that is wild. It's weird to me that the Twins share that fact of never paying any overage with the Rockies. That's not a team I want to be keeping company with personally. But yeah, you're spot on. The penalties, yeah, you're 5 to 10% over or more than 5% up to 10%, you pay 75% tax and lose a future first rounder. 10 to 15%, you pay 100% tax and you lose a first and a second rounder. And then more than 15%, you lose 2 future firsts in addition to 100% tax on the overage. So steep penalties there. But that draft pool, right, that only kind of incorporates the slot values from the picks that you have in the first 10 rounds, right? So my last question, I'm asking you really big questions, man. I'm sorry. I'll give you a break in a second. Rounds 11 through 20 work a little bit differently, the second half of the draft, and those picks do not come with an assigned slot value. So give us a little overview of how the third day works.
Right. So back when this first started, I believe the first 10 picks, like the last pick of the 10th round was just a shade over $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything after that, the limit was $100,000, and then anything you spent over $100,000 counted towards your pool. And so what teams will do, and now, we're losing focus here, so
Oh, there
that's
we
okay
go.
because people aren't going to look at me. Now it's $150,000,
Yep.
and teams will spend less on picks on the first 2 days in an effort to save some of that money so then they can throw it towards people on day 3, right? So if you're you have 500,000 to spend on a player or on your draft pick, you draft a guy that's not necessarily on a board, you sign it for $20,000. That gives you $480,000 plus $150,000 to spend on one guy or spread it out, right? And so you can spend that amount of money, which I think the Twins did on a lot of players last year, right? It's like, we'll give you 150,000, we'll give you 150,000, we'll give you 150,000, and it gets done. The one thing that's been added here is that the draft and follow, and I don't know that we've even talked about this.
No.
The draft and follow used to be a thing. That's how the Twins got Nick Blackburn, right? They drafted him, they followed him, and they signed because there's a limit, right? There's like 3 weeks after the draft, everybody's got to be signed. Now there's a thing where if you go JUCO, you can actually sign. I don't know if it's 1 month prior to the draft. So the Twins, one of their undrafted or unsigned draft picks from last year, could still sign with the Twins this year. So that's then how that works against the pool. I'm not even entirely sure because that's kind of new. But it's a good opportunity for teams to do like the Brewers did last year, right? Where you're spending money on dudes that weren't necessarily supposed to be there, but you had that money set aside, and then you can take a shot. If you don't sign a guy that was drafted in the first 10 rounds, you lose that bonus pool. If you don't sign a guy that you drafted in round 11, there's no money there, so you don't lose that. So that's why it's like, why don't you just take the guy in round 6? Well, if he might not sign, we're not going to take him in round 6 because we're going to get that money, lock in the savings, and then go in round 11 and try to give him that money. And if he says no, that's fine. We'll go to somebody else. We don't lose the money. So I don't know what the percentage is. It's super, super high that if you're drafted in the top 10 rounds, you're going to sign because teams need to know that. And that, I think, is the big deal. If it's 90% or 95%, if you hear your name called in the top 10 rounds, the team is almost certain that you're going to sign a professional contract.
Yep. Awesome overview, man. Yeah. So a couple of concrete examples I think we can use to kind of round this out before we talk about pools that were announced for 2024, right? So Twins and the Brewers approached the draft in 2 really different ways in 2023. Twins, much more kind of typical traditional, right? Drafting guys, generally paying at or around slot for them. The Brewers took an entirely different approach where they were incredibly flexible with their bonus pool. If your camera can't last 33 minutes, how's it going to handle a 4-hour draft day 1 live stream?
It's an excellent question. It's not going to very well.
That's my question. The Brewers, on the other hand, right? They paid under slot for Josh Noth. They paid under slot for Brock Wilken. They paid under slot for another couple of guys, which allowed them to pay close to $1 million over slot for Eric Batanti in round 3 and Cooper Pratt in round 6. And so one key aspect of draft strategy that we don't have a ton of sight lines into, but is really important for what your haul is coming out of the draft, is how you manipulate your spending power. Obviously, the more picks that you have and the more money you have, the more waves you can kind of make in the draft. And that's why this announcement of bonus pools is so important. And so we know now exactly where the Brewers, the Twins, and the Cubs stand in relation to the other major league teams. So let's start with the Brewers. And we're not going to go through the slot values for all of these, but there are a few things I think that are worth highlighting. And Jeremy, definitely chime in if I'm missing things, right? So the Brewers total draft pool is roughly $12.9 million. That's 9th best in Major League Baseball. Their first pick is pick 17 in round 1. That's worth about 4.5. Their compensation pick for the Corbin Burns trade is 34. They pick right after the Twins. And that pick they netted from the Orioles is worth right around 2.7 million. So literally that pick from that trade vaulted them from middle of the pack to top third in terms of overall bonus pool. They pick in round 2. Their comp round B pick is worth 1.2 million, and that's that rotating pick that Jeremy talked about. So 12.9 million, ninth best in MLB. How do you like the Brewers pool and kind of balance of picks and flexibility heading into the 24 draft?
I mean, it's hard not to love it based on what they did last year, right?
For sure.
They'll take a player that's going to be really good at 17, and then they're going to get 3 more bites at the apple before day one's over. And if they can find good values there, that's going to allow them to do some crazy things like they did last year on day 3. And so I love it for the Brewers. They have a great system, and it's only gonna get stronger.
Yep, I would agree. And I think the Brewers are one of the most adept drafting organizations because they have to be. Twins and the Brewers are in a really similar position, so we'll cover the Twins next. Both of those orgs have 5 top 100 picks. That's really, really where you want to be. So the Twins pick first in the first round, pick 21 overall. It's worth $3.9 million. Obviously, that's lower in the first round. There's going to be some nice college talent there, the way that the consensus board is shaping up. The Twins' next pick is at 33. That's their compensation for Sonny Gray rejecting the qualifying offer and signing a free agent deal. Is it over 50 million? I think it has to be, or is it 75?
Yeah.
I forget which. I think it's 50.
Yep.
That 33rd pick is worth $2.75 million. So that Sonny Gray qualifying offer, Twins fans have a lot to thank for their position in the 2024 draft. Twins pick in round 2, comp round B, that's worth 1.1 million, and then obviously third round for their 5th top 100 pick. Their bonus pool is 12.2 million, so just 750,000 or so behind the Brewers. That's good for 11th best in baseball. Jeremy, you're back. Any thoughts on the Twins? How they're looking heading into draft day? They're in a pretty similar boat to the Brewers.
So the thing that I like for teams, and I don't know, teams can use it differently, and you never really know how the draft's going to turn out, obviously, until it's happening. But when teams have 2 picks relatively close to each other, it gives you a better idea of how to handle things, right? So the Brewers have more money at 17, but from what happens from 17 to 34 is pretty much anybody's guess, right? There's 17 more picks that have to go off the board. The Twins have less money with 21 and 33, but when they come on the board at 21, there's only 12 picks there. So you can have a better idea of, okay, how can we manipulate this money to get the 2 guys that we want, right? And maybe 21 and 33, it's too far away because that gap isn't huge, right? 3.3 or 3.9 to 2.7. It's not super huge. But I think that can give them, like, okay, we have 6 college pitchers that we like at, this price point. Let's go with someone else here at 21 and then take the college pitcher at 33, knowing that we can pay him if we can get him down there. But really how they set their board is going to kind of impact that. But having 4 picks on day 1, 5 picks in the top 100, you're going to come away with good players in a draft that I think, and you can certainly weigh in, is going to be strong in that area, right? How great is it from 1 to 5? Well, not as good as last year. How great is it from 5 to 16? That remains to be seen. How good is this draft going to be, though, from like 25 to 70? I feel like it's going to be pretty strong in that tier.
Yeah, that sounds and feels kind of right. based off of where we are. That's another thing. And this is a topic for another day, but it's another thing I like a lot about the consensus board, right? Because this isn't something we've made publicly available yet, but it'll spit out a composite number for each prospect. And so last year with this consensus top 5, you had composite scores that were like,
Right.
1.9, 3, 3, 4.1. This year, there's a lot more like stratification early. Like it's really already now a kind of 2-horse race for number 1, I think, with Bazana and Condon. And then you take a little step down. You have another couple of guys, another little step down. So it's interesting the way that tiers kind of emerge from that. But I agree with you. I do think there's going to be some really nice value in the like 20 to 60, 20 to 70 range. And honestly, that's a part of the board that we'll talk about later today. And I'm excited to dig in with you more and more as we get closer to July. Let's finish with the Cubs. The Cubs are unlike these two teams. It should be noted because they're not a revenue receiving team. Cubs are a big market team, and that's reflected in their drafting. Unlike they're unlike the Brewers, but like the Brewers, they have an incredibly strong farm system. Here's how their bonus pool lines up for 2024. They have 9.8 million. So around 3 million and change less than the Twins. That's good for a 19th best in Major League Baseball. They only have 3 top 100 picks. And the third of those, pick 90, is only worth 826,000. So they've got pick 14 in the first round. That's worth just over 5 million. Great. A pick in round 2, that's 54. That's worth 1.6. And then pick 90. So let me ask you this. If you look at those Cubs picks and their overall pool of money and you compare it to the Twins and the Brewers, what do you think like the implications are for how the Cubs approach the draft and how they draft in rounds 1, 2, and 3 compared to those other orgs that we just talked about?
I think we saw last year there's a lot of different permutations on how that can go, but I think we saw a pretty good example last year where they took a really, really good player that was high on boards in Matt Shaw. And then when you get to 54, wherever they picked in the second round last year, I think it was pretty similar. You're either taking a guy that's got second round talent as a second round value and is still a good player, or you're saying, how can I make this 1.6 be farther? I can go high ceiling with low floor. And they took an injured pitcher, right? And Jackson Wiggins. And so that's kind of something they have to do. Otherwise, they go further down their board with that first pick and hope that someone lasts until 54. And so that's the part with this draft. Like, you have a first round pick, a second round pick, and a third round pick, and you are one of 30 teams, and you have 3 of 90, which means you have the 90th pick. You are a great team. You should be picking 90th and 60th and 30th. But instead, you're picking 14th, have 40 picks before your next pick, and then have 36 picks before your third pick. And the teams like the Cubs, like the Yankees, like the Dodgers, have to just sit around and wait more. And the other talent's going to the other teams, the bad smaller teams. And we're starting to see how the Orioles are being built, right? How the Diamondbacks are being built.
Yeah, for real.
How the Brewers are being built. And then you look at some teams that get these extra picks and you wonder what the heck they're doing, because why aren't they good? The A's get these picks. They're terrible. Their farm system's not good. But the Reds, who also get these picks, seem to be doing all right for themselves. The Rays, this is where they make hay, right? They take guys that are kind of off the board, and they're fine. The Pirates are coming around because they get these extra picks. But then you have teams like the Rockies that just, the Rockies and the A's. And
so, trombone.
Yeah, and nobody feels bad for them, right? Nobody's going to ever spend their time feeling bad for these teams. But that's the difference in the Cubs 9 million and the Brewers 12 million and the Guardians how many million?
19, I believe.
It's absurd, right? And so the Guardians stand to do some really good things because they have access to way more money and lucked out in the in the lottery. Now, the one thing we didn't mention, you mention it quite often on Twitter, so I feel like you can take this if you know where I'm going. The new lottery rules are really
Oh,
gonna.
the new lottery rules. Yeah. Okay. So new lottery rules are essentially in place to ensure that there's not repetitive tanking, right? So one example of that is the odds to land the first overall pick. Major League Baseball makes them the same for the teams with the worst 3 records. I think that's actually taking a leaf out of the NBA's book. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But it's something like 18% for each of those 3 teams with the worst 3 records. Any large market team that lands a lottery pick is ineligible for a pick inside the top 10 the following year. So,
How bad are the White Sox this year?
So the Chicago White Sox, who did not do well by the lottery last year, they're picking 5th. So it's just not a great spot, I think, in this draft. We'll see. The elite college arms may make us think differently about that. But they're picking 5th. The highest the White Sox can pick in 2025 is 10th. There's another team in that boat, because what happens, I hear you ask, for a small market team that lands in the lottery? Well, there's rules for them too. If a small market or revenue receiving team ends up with a lottery pick, they cannot have it more than 2 years in a row. And the Oakland A's are in that situation, or the Sacramento A's, or just the A's, whatever A's they are. They've had a lottery pick 2 years in a row. They will also be ineligible for a top 10 pick in 2025. So bear with me. If the Oakland Athletics finish with a worse record in 2024 than the White Sox, the highest the White Sox can pick in 2025 is 11th. And they are brutally bad.
Mm-hmm. So one thing, shout out to, I don't know if you ever used Tankathon.
Oh yeah.
Tankathon's probably the website that I visit the most, because I use it for standings. I use it for everything. Right now, you can go in based on today's results and you can simulate the lottery for baseball. So I do it one time. The Rockies move up from 3 to 1. The Mariners move up from 8 to 2. The Astros move up from 4 to 3. The Mets move up from 6 to 4. The Marlins drop from 2 to 5. The Giants move from 7 to 6 on the account of being in the lottery. The Twins, who were 9, move up to 7 on account of they're not the White Sox or the A's.
Yeah.
And they're just moving up. So they're going to be, if the season ended today, the Twins are in the 9th position, but they're not drafting lower than 7th.
Right.
And the first time I simmed this today, they ended up moving up to 2. And so I like that better. But yeah, everything's this one, Rockies 1, Twins 2. So if you're into the draft lottery and figuring out, they have odds, they have fun stuff, and you can see playoff seeding too if you're into that. But it's really too bad for the bad teams. But I think the idea is you don't want to be there, so that should encourage you to go spend money and hope that all your players don't get hurt in the first week like the White Sox did, because it's gonna. The idea is to not keep bad teams bad, but the result is it's going to keep bad teams bad.
Yep. And I think it'll be something that gets increasingly tricky to keep track of, based on especially the small market teams that might get a lottery pick 2 years in a row, right? But this is the second time we've had a team ineligible for a top 10 pick potentially. The Washington Nationals are not eligible this year. I think they would take that because they got Dylan Cruz last year, but you'll notice the Nationals are picking 10th this year despite having a terrible record in 2023.
Okay, let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, let's quickly talk about international pools, because those were announced at the same time we'll quickly whiz through this because it's not relevant for months. If folks are interested in the international signing period, we did an episode a little while ago with Ben Badler from Baseball America, who was awesome and a complete wealth of knowledge and the expert in this area. But the international signing period, the next one, will start on January 15th, 2025, and runs all the way through to December 15th of 2025. So it basically lasts for the entire year. And as an interesting nugget, if you're a Twins fan, they have around 700,000 left in their international bonus pool this year. And so we tend to just think that money disappears and goes away immediately. It's all spent. It's not. A lot of teams maintains a little bit of financial flexibility throughout the year with that. But the international signing period bonus pools were also released. Here's the general kind of skinny on where folks are. The Twins can spend up to $7.5 million roughly in the 2025 international signing window. The Brewers can spend the exact same because they release them in these clusters, right? So $7,555,500 to be exact. Those are the Twins and the Brewers are in a group of 8 teams that all have that maximum allowable amount, which is great for both of those organizations. It will be interesting to track with the Twins with Roman Barinas at the helm, new in that position of kind of organizing that international signing window and scouting department. And then the Cubs, unsurprisingly, are in a group of 12 teams who rank much more middle of the pack in spending. So they can spend up to $6.26 million in 2025. So about $1.5 million less than the Twins and Brewers. And similarly to the draft rules, there's certain signings that won't count against your bonus pool. So if you make a signing under $10,000, that doesn't count against your pool. But both the Twins and the Brewers in a great spot ahead of the 2025 international signing period.
Okay, so when you said the Twins have $700,000 left, do they have that earmarked for somebody?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. It's something I read, so I should say, like, I don't have that confirmed from anyone, but it was a list of teams that was released of, like, roughly how much is left in their international bonus pool. I'm not sure how organizations think of that throughout the arc of the year. Obviously, they have agreements in place with most of their major guys
Right.
multiple years in advance, which is a conversation for another day. But I'm not sure how organizations think about maintaining some level of flexibility throughout the year.
So a couple things here that I just want to add because this is just nerdy stuff and that
and we're
fun
nerds.
I feel like at some point I read that the Twins were connected to some outfielder from Cuba. But then I didn't really see anything more about that. Back in the original time of this, when it was like, could we make this a draft? But we're not going to make this a draft.
Mm-hmm.
each spot, each like draft spot, but not draft spot, had its own value. And so the teams could trade their pool money, but they had to trade these basically whatever was assigned. So the Twins would have X pick had this much money. They could trade that money or this money or that, whatever they had in their pool. The combination of that. Now they've simplified that. The money can still be traded in certain increments. And I believe there was a trade today or recently that involved like $250,000 in the international signing window. But the thing that I think back to is when Ohtani was coming over, he was subject to the bonus pool, and the Twins had saved some money up, right, to make a last ditch effort. And when they realized that they weren't going to get him, they traded money to, I don't remember what team, to give that team more of a belief that they could trade money. And then they turned around and traded the rest of their money to the Angels for Jacob Pearson. The Angels went on to sign Ohtani. The Twins got 2 prospects out of the deal for money that they were never going to we're never going to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, the reality is that a lot of teams spend most of their money early or have it earmarked early, but every once in a while someone defects and then they're a free agent and then they're eligible to sign and choose not to sign until they can make more money. It's one of those really weird things because in the draft, you enter the draft and then all the players that are available.
Yep.
And in this, you enter it January 15th and you're not sure what's going to happen. In fact, you're not even sure how old some of these kids are. So there's a lot more at stake here without really having all the information. So that's one that we can certainly talk more about, but I feel like 6 minutes is probably enough for anybody. And now we should get to the real fun stuff, even though we're pushing the
hey, we don't have a producer here today, so come on, man. We don't have anyone reining us in.
Nope. And it's halftime of the Wolves game, so I got at least like another hour before I gotta shut her down tonight and go to bed.
You want to talk some draft real quick?
I don't know why we wouldn't. I mean, you said it's a halfway point of the college season. The snow's melted. People are wearing shorts. Like, we're that close.
High school baseball has started in Minnesota. How about that?
Let's go.
Yeah. So maybe you can. So we'll see what your skill level is like with the screen share situation compared to produce the O's. Here we go.
Boom.
So the consensus draft board, available at Twin Sterling, Brewer Fanatic, Northside Baseball, and Fish on First, got its first update this week. So I want to take a couple of minutes to talk through that and then spotlight some guys I think are interesting that I think you will be intrigued by because you spoke to that range of 30 through 60. So consensus draft board, friendly reminder that pulls together all the publicly available boards that we can find. I've now established what the cadence is going to be for updating this. It is going to get a weekly update. So every Sunday night, it's going to get an update for Monday morning, and that's going to look like one of two things. Either we're adding additional names and write-ups, or the order is changing because we've updated boards on the back end, or both. In this case, it's both. So we went from 50 to 60, and that covers an additional pick for the Cubs at 54, an additional pick for the Marlins at 56, an additional pick for the Brewers at 57, and an additional pick for the Twins at 60. And there's some other stuff coming here, right? We talked about this last week, but collapsible player profiles are coming. We're also working on some kind of indicators to show if prospects are moving up or down or are new on the board. So there's some additional features rolling out, but we're still on day like 6 here. But thanks for everyone who's taken time to check that out. You'll notice somewhere at the top, it should say like last updated April 8th or whatever. So that's how you can be sure that you're looking at the most recent up-to-date version.
Okay, I got questions.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah.
You have number 1, who was number 1 before.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Charlie Condon, number 2.
Who was not number 2 before.
How big is the gap between number 1 and number 2?
So I can tell you specifically in just a second, and while I'm pulling that up, I will let you know that Travis Bazzana was the only top 10 player to keep his same rank from the first board to this board. Every other player moved either up or down or entered the top 10 or dropped from the top 10. So that's a ton of movement. And I will tell you anecdotally, that is way, way more this year than last year, where we really had the stable top 5 and Malskeens was the only guy to enter and Dolander dropped a little bit.
Right. Now, Bazzana's been on an absolute heater lately.
He is on a heater. I think his home run total from last year was 11. He's already at 18 or something crazy this year. So I'll give you the composite rankings for both of those guys because they're nice even numbers and they never usually are. But Bazzana's composite rank is 2 and Charlie Condon's composite rank is 3 at the moment.
Okay.
There will be updates coming to that, but those two have definitely separated themselves a little bit at the top. I'm going to prognosticate that despite Travis Bazzana being on an all-world heater, Charlie Condon is going to overtake him before we get to May.
Okay.
That's my prediction for the top two.
And so when you say their composite numbers 2 and 3, what you're telling me is they're ranked not 1 more than they are ranked 1.
Correct.
Right? That's just oversimplifying how averages work. And so that to me is a big thing. Now, as we work down, is Weatherholt playing again?
Weatherholt is back and looking really good. He picked up exactly kind of where he left off, which was really, really great. Possibly like 70 grade hit tool. Great to see him back. He was listed as day to day for literally 30 days, which is a bit frustrating. But he's back. That's exciting. It's also worth noting Nick Kurtz's heater.
Okay. Yep, I was going to get to him.
I should have made a note of this. Next week, starting next week, we'll get more organized with like here are the actual concrete like nuggets from college baseball this week. Kurtz has something like 9 home runs in his last 8 games. He is probably the hottest hitter on the planet right now, and he has fallen a little bit after just kind of a fine start to the college season, but he's really come on and certainly reminded people why he was a consensus top 3 guy at the beginning of this season. It's been absolutely unbelievable.
So I also, and this is no offense to Nick Kurtz if you're listening, which you're probably not, but as a Twins fan, I would love for Nick Kurtz to go number 1 to the Guardians. Right? There are other players that I would like to see a lot less come to Target Field and hit balls out. And if Bazzana's the first pick, I think he's a better prospect. Condon scares me a lot. The pitchers, which probably won't go on, Burns and Smith, scare me. Braden Montgomery scares me.
Really good.
But these are all guys at number 1 that there's just something else about Nick Kurtz that I'm not sold on yet. But I came around on Wilkin last year.
Yeah,
come around to Condon too. So let's jump down here. Luke Holman to the Twins at 33. Is this new?
That is new. So right there sees kind of placeholder like team signage over to make sure that people know where their picks are. And there was a lot of movement around here.
We talked about Holman last week.
We did talk about Holman last week, and that was completely coincidental. I had no idea that's where he was going to wind up. That was just a coincidence. Still love what he's done this season. But let's scoot on down to the 50s.
Yep. There's actually one name that I wanted to talk to you about before we got to 50.
Let's do it.
Or maybe it was at 50. I feel like maybe it was 50. I stopped on him because I felt like, okay, maybe he was lower down. Okay, let's stop. So we've added 51 through 60, right?
Yep, 51 through 60. Yep.
Okay, so let's start with because all the time you talk to Twins fans and they're like, we need a catcher, and Ryan Jeffers has kind of stopped that talk because Ryan Jeffers has been great, but
love Ryan Jeffers.
There's not any, and maybe that's, I don't know what just happened there. I feel like there are some high ceiling catching prospects, but not like super well known, high drafted, high ceiling catching prospects. So here we are at 51. Walter Janik. Guy sounds like he's 62 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know we've touched on this very briefly, right? But 2023 draft class at catcher was really bad. There were 3 top 100 consensus guys. It was Kyle Teal, who Twins fans were excited about for a second, and Blake Mitchell, who went to the Royals.
Who's their number 1 prospect?
Who's their number 1 prospect? And Michael Carrico, who went to the Cubs for really good value, I thought, but he was like consensus ranked like 80 or
versatile though.
My last check, I counted 8 legit catching profiles in the current consensus top 100, which is way more interesting than last year. And a couple of those names have really dominated the conversation. 3 guys. Malcolm Moore, who's a catcher at Stanford, who's had kind of a slow start.
Yeah, very slow.
Caleb Lomavita, who's really interesting, who plays for Cal. Aggressive hitter, kind of power speed combo. He runs really well for a catcher. It's kind of weird. And then Jacob Cozart, NC State, who is literally like a big dude for a catcher. I think he's 6'3", 6'4", but like a really nice combination of good defensive profile and emerging prolific offensive profile. But I want to talk about this guy, Walker Yannick. He is a catcher for Sam Houston State. He is new on the board with this update. 51st overall. He's hitting 394, 477, 701 on the season, 8 home runs, 11 doubles, 2 triples. And this is the kind of prospect I like, and you can tell me if this prospect profile appeals to you. People say about prospects like, oh, there's no like carrying tool, right? Like he doesn't do one thing really, really outstandingly. But Walker Yannick does everything really solidly. And I really like that. Like he has one of the better arms for any defensive catcher in the class. Good pop time. Like any college catcher or amateur catcher work to do on the receiving stuff. He has a chance for above average hit and power tools. And so there's really just like no overall holes in the profile, and he plays a premium defensive position. So people tend to levy that as a criticism of like, oh, there's no carrying tool. But I kind of like that. Like he's well-rounded and he does everything well. That just gives more of an opportunity for guys to provide value down the road if one skill or one tool isn't coming along in the way that you wanted it to. But I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, do you prefer a prospect to like, oh, the power's there, he's got it, it's great? Or are you also open to that kind of more of an all-round profile?
I think when you're taking someone super high, it's hard to do it without a carrying tool, right? Also, apologies because my eyes must not be good because I thought for sure his name was Walter. And I'm looking at him like, where am I seeing Walter? So the other thing too is you say receiving needs some work, but I think we're getting to the point where are we going to care about that?
Yeah.
Because that's going to change. And even if you receive really well, you get the dude from the other day that's calling strikes 14 inches off the plate. Like, it doesn't matter how well you receive it. You can't, the framing's not going to matter. So, yeah, I think that the Twins targeting a college catcher on day one, day one makes a heck of a lot of sense because they have the opportunities to do it. So,
imagine if you got a profile like that at pick like 60.
Yeah, you feel pretty good about that. And he's probably by the end of the year, or at the beginning of next year anyway, he's catching it at Cedar Rapids and hopefully working well with the pitchers. Let's keep moving on here as we're here. So here's a name that stuck out to me. Number 54, Noah Franco.
Yeah.
And the parts that he's gonna step, the part that's gonna help him is the age thing, right? If you reclassify, you're automatically moving up on everyone's draft board because you're going to be one of the youngest dudes in the draft. So 6'3", 190, IMG, which has produced dudes, postgraduate school or whatever you want to call it. For many of these guys, it's a high school, but you're traveling to play baseball. How do we feel about Noah Franco? Where's he gonna end up? Because right now he's a left-handed pitcher, first baseman, outfielder, and he's not going to be those things.
Yep. That's really difficult to say. I think most people, like him more as a hitter at the moment than a pitcher. And there is such a massive increase in the amount of guys who are two-way prospects in this draft, even from last cycle. There's like 5 or 6 guys that are named as like two-way prospects, but he's a TCU commit, just a really good athlete, one of those like projectable guys, right? If you're like 6'3", 190, you can count on adding on, whether that's like power or velocity or whatever. The like offensively, it's definitely like a like hit over power at the moment, but that's the kind of frame you're going to project power in, and expect to see it come eventually. He's a really good mover defensively. He could fit in the corner, first base profile too at worst. He also has like a nice approach at the plate. So I think the Noah Franco, the hitter, is preferable to Noah Franco, the pitcher. He's going to be an interesting one to track. He started pre-draft cycle, like preseason, as a consensus top 30 guy, and he's trickled down a little bit. I'm not sure whether that's due to evaluators' looks at him. Maybe it's to do with signability. Maybe they're expecting him to make it to campus. I'm not sure. But he's someone who has trickled down a little bit and will be interesting. But one of like 4 or 5 or 6 two-way prep guys that are legitimately have a case to argue as, hitters and pitchers both.
Okay, 2 more guys I want to ask you about.
Okay.
Dallas Baptist,
Yes.
55. We see guys coming from DBU, which
Cody Funderburg.
Who'd you say?
Cody Funderburg.
Right. So the Twins have gone there before. Typically, you go there, you see guys, you go there again. I feel like they've went Dallas Baptist before, and so here we have, and you say on Franco 6'3", 190. Okay, we can add to that. How about a 22-year-old who's 6'6", 215? That's how I want to build him in the lab.
Yeah, dude. Ryan Johnson is one of the most interesting pitchers in this draft for me. If you're listening to this and you're listening to me talk about Ryan Johnson, just log into Twitter and look up Ryan Johnson and watch him throw. It is a really unusual look. Obviously, like, he's a big physical presence, kind of a quick pitching motion, throws from a lower arm slot. Looks a little like effortful, or just like a lot of moving parts in his delivery, you might describe it as, but I'm not here to criticize that because his results have been incredible. So he has a fastball that's been up to 100 already. It sits 93 to 95, has some arm side run to it. His fastball has been hit quite a bit. That's not kind of a bat misser. He's thrown his slider about 50% of the time as a college starting pitcher, which is kind of wild. His slider's nasty, ton of lateral movement. Also throwing a cutter now as kind of a bridge pitch between the two. But let me hit you with some numbers real quick here. And DBU is a top 20, 25 team in the country this year. They're real good. 56 innings pitched, 177 ERA, 8 walks in 56 innings, and 82 Ks.
Ain't bad.
Really good.
Does he wear glasses when he throws?
I don't think so.
Oh, because I just found this picture and there's a picture of him wearing glasses, and it's like, okay, now you're different when you start doing that. I feel like it'd be really hard to throw 100 miles an hour if you got something sitting on your face.
First 3 starts of the year, 13 strikeouts in the first one, 14 in the second one, 15 in the third start of the year. Dominant.
But was he throwing against the Twins? Because then it's not that hard.
He wasn't throwing against Erod and his 75% contact rate. Anyway, Johnson's a really interesting one, right? Like I feel like he's going to be a really interesting litmus test because people will say, oh, he looks like a reliever, but he has results to back up. And he has loud stuff and really good traits, really good clay. And so he's someone I'd be interested in around that range. It's just really, really interesting and unique college pitcher profile.
Okay, last one I want to ask you about. Go down to the bottom of the list. Twins draft 60th. There's an emblem next to a prep pitcher, 6'4", 215. Love
Yep.
that. Named Duncan Marston, who
Yep.
comes from Harvard Westlake,
Harvard
California.
Westlake.
Twins love California.
Yep.
Harvard Westlake is
Powerhouse.
a powerhouse. It's where Lucas Giolito was from. If you have
Check Flaherty.
money to
Max
go
Fried.
to Harvard Westlake, you go to Harvard Westlake.
Yeah.
And so just a broad statement. I feel like price tags are maybe going to be more if money's not a huge deal, because it's like, I'll go to college, I'll do it for 3 years, and then I'll go make more money. So tell me about Duncan Marston, Harvard Westlake prep.
Yeah, so if I had to forecast, I would say he's going to zoom up the board in the next couple of updates. That'd be my guess. He's been on the radar for a minute. He's a little bit overshadowed on that team because Bryce Rayner also plays for Harvard Westlake, two-way prep guy who we've talked about, has a lot of steam. Marston missed a chunk of his sophomore and junior seasons because he had Tommy John. But he's back on the mound now. He's healthy, and he's been really, really good. You mentioned the frame, really good, like prototypical starter's frame. Room to add more, but like he already has really loud stuff. So fastball sits like 92 to 95. He can hit the upper 90s with that. Been up to as high as like 99 in bullpens and side sessions and whatnot. Really good sweeping slider. Previously thrown a curveball. Also showing feel for a changeup. So potentially like a platform of 4 pitches that he's shown a feel for, or that are at least solid average. He flipped his commitment, interestingly, from Stanford, which is notoriously difficult to pry prep players away from. He flipped his commitment from Stanford to Wake Forest. So he would be certainly very interesting in college. I think the end of the notes that I wrote there on him, if it wasn't for the injury history, he'd probably be a shoo-in top 30 pick. And I think he might end up in that top 30 to 40 range anyway, but he's another new entrant on the board, and he's playing in a big high school competition in Cary, North Carolina, at USA Baseball with Harvard Westlake this week. I think he actually started today, and it looked like he was cruising through about 4 innings. He had already struck out 4 or 5 guys and given up nothing. So he's a name to keep an eye on. I think he'll be zooming up as we go here.
The Cary baseball tournament's a huge one.
Oh yeah.
Which reminds me of another draft story that I'll file away to tell at some point.
We're gonna have to cash in on some of these at some point,
We will, I know. And if we weren't at 1 hour and 20 minutes, I'd tell the Trout story. But I feel like if someone waited this long to listen to the Mike Trout story, they'll come back next week. And so
okay. So we should wrap it up. I will finish by saying I'm not exactly sure what we're going to talk about next week, other than we will highlight many more guys on the minor league side after we have 2 weeks of data, not one. We'll dig some more into some draft prospects. We have talked about doing a full mock draft, you and I, through Comp Round A. That's something we could do on the show. We also potentially have a really significant guest in the works, but we won't talk much about that yet until we get that confirmed. So if you have strong opinions on what you want us to cover next, mock draft, more draft prospect profiles, more minor league data, whatever is appealing to you guys, let us know. We will absolutely take that into consideration. Until then, go ahead.
No, I got one question I got to ask you. Okay? So right now your board has 3 potential Twins picks. We haven't talked about Kalen Culpepper yet, but he's who's at 21 on the consensus board. Third baseman, but maybe middle infield type at Kansas State, right-handed hitter. Then we have a college pitcher in Luke Holman at 33, LSU's best starter, right? And then at 60, we have a prep pitcher. If on April 10th, the draft was held, and that's what the Twins did. Those 3 players. How do you feel about that draft?
So if they took whatever those 3 players that were there on consensus,
Yep. Culpepper, Holman, Marston.
I like all of those players quite a bit.
Okay.
I think Culpepper, I know the Twins have been in to see Culpepper a bunch already. So that's
he seems like a twinsy type player.
That's a connection that's legit. Like just a really solid college player, good athlete, good tools, good production, like all of the boxes to check there. I think the one of those 3 picks I'd have some questions about is Holman.
Okay.
And just wondering about his secondaries and how well that will play at the pro level as a starting pitcher. But I think those are all 3 profiles that we haven't talked about Culper, but we talked about the other 2 who I like quite a bit. How about you? Thoughts on that haul?
I mean, I feel like that is a realistic way of doing things, right? Hitter first, right? Solid college pitcher. I maybe would flip prep, take the prep first, right? And then take whatever college guys left. But who knows? Because price tags are the one thing that's not going to be factored into this board. Yep. And that's what's going to really be the reason that the Noble Meyers and the Whites start to drop, right? Noble Meyer, and
Thomas White.
And that's why those guys fall. And so we'll start to maybe get more of that information as the draft gets closer, and maybe we won't. But I think those are all things that really enter into the factors of where these guys are going to go.
Dude, maybe, and one of our friends of the show, Michael, pointed out having that flexibility with the gray pick, right, is going to give you potentially the opportunity to grab a prep at 33 who you really, really like for a good chunk of change. But maybe we should do that weekly, right? Like based on the board this week, here's who the Twins would be taking with their top 3 picks, top 4 picks, same for Brewers, and so on and so forth. And we can kind of track that over time.
Yeah, for sure. Right, no more questions for you. No more questions.
Okay. Let's call it a day. Let us know what you guys are interested in for next week. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. We sure appreciate it. We'll be back for another week, hopefully with a few more Twins wins. But until then, enjoy the baseball.